All right, everybody, welcome back to the Millennial Sales Podcast. It is your host, Tommy Tahoe Alemo. I'm excited for today's episode. Before we get to today's content, just want to give a shout out. Sponsoring this podcast it's me. It's the new prospecting boot camp that I unleashed. The next cohort starts July 3rd. This is a 30-day boot camp intended to help you prospect better. That includes live coaching from me every single week, a 24/7 Slack community, dozens of other BDRs, AEs, founders, sales leaders in the trenches with you trying to get better and help each other out. Guest speakers like Justin Welsh and Sam McKenna and Ian Cognac, people like that have spoken at these events. So people are getting promoted. People are making more money than they know what to do with. And part of that is because of building a lot of pipelines. So come join me. You can go to my LinkedIn page or tasales.co to learn more. Only have limited seats available. Every single cohort I've done has sold out, so you want to check this one out. Okay. Today, I'm talking with Alex Kremer for the podcast, a good friend of mine. We are co-running the Arise immersion, 3-day immersion with our friend Clara Johnson coming in July as well. Alex is a sales leader at Catalyst. He is the founder of Alluviance. He is a good friend. He's a soulful dude, and he's got a hell of a lot of experience to back up, you know, everything that he says. So this is one of those convos that I wish lasted 3 hours instead of 45 minutes. But we got Alex for what we could get him for, and I really appreciated the combo. So without further ado, here is me and Alex Kremer. Let's go. All right, next up here on the pod, my guy, Alex Kremer, Director of Sales over at Catalyst, founder, CEO of Alluviance, my good friend. How are we doing this afternoon?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling really good. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we put it on the calendar, and it's just been like stirring the entire week. It's like Friday afternoon. I'm like, okay, this is a good way to finish off the week here.
It's good, man. It's my last call of the week that I know of, at least until someone calls me. And I'm excited for that. And I was thinking this morning, because now that we're running this retreat together, people ask me all the time, like, how do I know you? How long have I known you? And it has been probably 5 or 6 years. But I can't exactly recall. I think it was through a mutual friend who was actually my boss. This might be not even an interesting way for people. But if they're interested in you, maybe they will care. Did you go to Flagship CrossFit in San Francisco?
I was a big Flagship CrossFit guy.
Okay.
That was my jam. My 3 years I lived in San Francisco.
Okay, cool. So it's probably through Rich Stone, if that name rings a bell. He was my boss out there when I was at Tech Target.
I used to, so it was when I was at Microsoft, and I was an account executive there, and I was like working in like the financial district, and Flagship was like a block and a half away from my office. And I always go there, and Rich was working at Tech Target. So he was like one of the only tech guys working in financial district. And so whenever it came to like squatting and doing power cleans, I'd always do them with Rich. And then we just talk about tech and sales and leadership and all sorts of good stuff. And he was a powerhouse, man. Yeah,
he still is. He still is. He's got the home gym now. I check him on Instagram. He was this podcast first ever episode, by the way. Fun fact for you.
That is a good fun
6 years
fact
ago.
there. Wow.
So, dude, I'm excited to have you on. And for people that aren't super familiar, just want to go through your background a little. You were rep at DocuSign, then into Microsoft, then got in relatively early at Outreach, spent almost 5 years there from AE all the way through sales manager, through sales director, now sales director at Catalyst, as well as running your own business of Alluviance. Those are just like heavy hitter names that, you know, everyone's heard of. Most people would die for some logos like that on their own LinkedIn or on their own resume. But I don't even know if I know how did you get into DocuSign in the first place? How'd you get into tech sales?
So DocuSign, so fun fact about me, is I actually had 6 internships throughout college. And my first
Man.
sales internship was the very end of my freshman year. And it was like a marketing recruiting thing. And I had a couple of other, jobs and internships. And then my junior year, in between my senior year of college, I was an intern at DocuSign as an SDR and was making cold calls to get people to write reviews on the Salesforce app exchange.
Okay.
And that was like the early days of DocuSign in Seattle. That was when it was competing against like EchoSign, and that was my first taste of tech sales, and it was terrifying to make cold calls back in the day.
If you had 6 internships, why did you choose to go into the and that was, you were cold calling at DocuSign for one of them, and God knows what you're doing for the other 5. Why was that the one that got your attention to then get into that career?
I knew. So in college, I was also the president of the Husky Sales Club. That was like my claim to fame. I went to University of Washington, and I loved sales, not necessarily because I am a sales guy. Like I don't have like the silver tongue or anything like that. I'm not gonna, be super suave or anything, but I knew that, building companies and selling and closing revenue was a very important foundation of any business that you're trying to build. And, I knew tech was obviously really, it was on fire, and I was right in the heart of Amazon and Microsoft. And I was just like, who knows what it is I truly want to end up doing in this world. But I know if I go into tech and I go into sales, that's going to give me the most amount of opportunities to really go from there. And, I've never been a big tech guy. I'm not actually passionate about like tech. It's funny, when I was at Microsoft, I mean, I was selling cloud, SQL surfaces, like some pretty serious tech. I was selling IT leaders, system admins. And as we really started to get into the product functionality, I would always feel like my eyes started to kind of glaze over. I was like, oh man, like I'm not curious and interested in the technology itself. But when it comes to running and facilitating a meeting, when it comes to developing great relationships with key executives, when it comes to thinking strategically about a deal and how to, overcome the objection and be aware of the risk, and also just work in a team and compete, right? I grew up playing sports. And I like to compete. I was like, I don't know what it is, but tech pays well, and there's who knows what opportunities will flow from that. So mostly like sales, but then my biggest goal always, and I knew this from, early days of college, probably even high school, is like, I wanted to be a leader. Like, yes, I like selling and I like, getting a commission check. But what was more important to me is I wanted to do that so I could eventually step into a manager and then a leadership role, because that always just was what was truly resonant for me, of building culture and working towards them and getting your crew of people together and be like, yo, let's fucking build something here.
So how were you were at DocuSign for 6-ish months and then Microsoft for a couple of years? How were those first, few years in tech sales, maybe pre-outreach days?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share Microsoft. So I was at Microsoft for 4 years, a little bit over 4 years, and I was selling into public sector, state and local government. And it's a great space. There's a lot of revenue there. You can learn great things. It didn't really jive me. Like, I wasn't like, oh man, like I'm energized by this. But it was great. And I learned how an enterprise corporate organization was run. Like, it was operationally sound. There was a person and a process for everything. And there was a very structured promotion path and territory alignment. And you're selling products that every company uses something of Microsoft.
Yeah.
Like whether it was Windows servers way back in the day, whether it was Windows OS operating system, whatever it was, Outlook Exchange. So the sell there was a little bit more account management focused, but there was a big transition of trying to get people from being on premises into the cloud. Like, it was really like that was the move into Azure, into Office 365 versus Office on-prem, and so that was really good. But through that time, there was always like a little bit of uh, fear that are they own, like I did very well there. I was, one of the fastest to be promoted up to a territory account executive after 2 years, where average was about 5. I was managing 150 accounts, and then I started managing 6 larger accounts. My biggest contract I ever closed at Microsoft was a $30 million contract. And I managed that the entire way through. And that was really, that was a lot of car rides from San Francisco down to San Jose to speak with the CIO every single Thursday. And, that was great because I had, I could hold executive business center meetings where I bring in, council members, where I bring in, people who are important to how a county or city is run, and teach them about how do they, provide for their clients, i.e. the people, the citizens of the city and county better. And what I always envisioned, was when I was in high school and college, I always loved business and wanted to eventually get into it. I always envisioned myself wearing a suit and a tie and being at a big oval table and standing up and speaking and giving a presentation to just executives, people who are in good positions. And I always envisioned that. And, I got the opportunity to live that vision at Microsoft. You didn't need to wear
Were
a suit.
You wearing a suit?
I wore a suit and tie, man.
Yeah. Okay. Respect.
I loved it, man, because first off, I was, 24, 25, and the average age of the person I was selling to was 40 and up, most likely. The average age of the person on my team was 40 and up. So there was definitely a little bit of an imposter syndrome of I need to look older than I am. I kind of grew my beard out a little bit. I actually, and this is terrible to say, but just shows some of the shame I felt from an imposter of not truly believing in myself. People one time asked me how old I was, and I lied. I said I was 30 when really I was 24, because I was afraid of what I would lose credibility within them.
Been there.
I mean, it's how it is. And, I think great for 4 years, sold a lot, got awards, I was able to buy a house from the shares and stock that I win at Microsoft, paid very well. So grateful for that. But there was always that little thought in my head of, are they only buying from me because I have an @Microsoft.com email address? Because this is just the upsell and they need to do it. Or I'm in the right time in the right place in my territory, whatever it might be. And so there was really a big, hunger that I had for becoming a great sales professional. That was really I wanted to know and feel like I could do discovery. I could negotiate like a badass. I could, insert product or service here, and I would have the ability to close the deal, because I knew that was an important skill set that I needed to have if I was going to be an effective leader. And that led me to leave Microsoft and taking the jump to a startup.
Yeah. And what number were you at Outreach ish?
I think it was 150-ish, somewhere along those lines.
That's early.
It was early, man. I mean, Outreach wasn't, it was a cool startup in Seattle. It was doing pretty well, but it was, when I joined, I think we weren't even at 25 million in revenue yet.
Yeah.
And when I left, I think we were, about 250 up or whatever it might be.
I was spending some time on your LinkedIn page this morning in prep, and was just going through, some of the accolades throughout your career, but especially the Outreach days of, first year, rookie of the year, promotion, manage a team, promotion, kicked off the New York chapter of the business, flew out, moved out, kicked that off, promotion, director of sales, number 1 out of 40 teams, President's Club, multiple President's Clubs. Spending almost 5 years at, one of the fastest growing SaaS companies in probably, in during that time period. I don't know what the numbers are. Exactly.
Gong and Outreach were fighting. It was who's the cool, sexy sales SaaS startup?
Yeah. And those were the two in 2020 when I was looking for a new job. Those were the two companies that I was going for. And I probably would have taken the job at Outreach if I didn't have to move to New York. I was interviewing with you, and I was like, man, I don't want to move to New York, but if I did, I'd be there.
My God. I feel like we talked at least once before that. We had, I think, got connected from Rich, but then you came in and you interviewed,
Yeah.
and I think we offered you the job, where we at least did not get to the point of being able to offer, because you're like, yeah, but I'm not willing to move. And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
come on, dude.
I know I wasn't in a spot where I was ready to move across the country, but otherwise, man, I had Manny on my podcast. I had Mark on the podcast. That's kind of how things started. And I loved so much about what you guys were doing. What stands out to me though, man, is that you, as you're talking and we just ran through a bunch of your accolades, that doesn't happen by luck. You talk a lot about the craft. A lot of people show up to their sales job as a job, and they focus on their number. They focus on, I've got to make 50 dials today. I've got to book 10 meetings this month. I've got to sell $1 million this year. And you have to do those, you have to see results. There's a leaderboard. And if you don't end up high on the leaderboard, you're not going to be in sales at that company maybe for long. But those are, and those are outputs of what your skill set are and what the work that you do. So talk to me a little bit about why you focus and what kind of led you to focus on both the craft of sales, which you're talking about discovery, negotiation, holding conversation with executives that are twice your age, as well as leadership, which we'll probably spend some more time on, but that's some similarities, but a whole different craft of leading leading a group of individuals to accomplish a task.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it initially started when I joined, a community. It was called Epic Impact at the time. Now it's called Abundant. And the now CEO of Abundant, his name is Ben Skemper. And he's a longtime friend, a longtime mentor and coach, and just a guy who I've learned so much about in terms of vision and whatnot. And he asked me, I was having a coaching call with him. I was a client of his. And I told him one time, I was just like, hey, man, like, I was at Outreach at the time. I was like, hey, man, I feel like I'm doing really well on like the demo and like doing good at discovery. I was like, but I want to be a closer. I want to like really like get like just put me on, like, let me get them to commit to a signature. And he did something that I will never forget. And he said, cool. If you were a good closer, how do you think you'd feel? I went in, I was like, oh, I feel great. Like, I'd just feel confident. I'd feel like just relaxed. I'd feel like I wouldn't have to like try so hard. He's like, cool. It's like, how do you think that would impact how you showed up with your partner? It's like, oh man, like I bet you like she would be like digging me. I'd be like more confident. She would be vibing. Like she would think her man was attractive. It's like, cool.
Yeah.
How do you think that would, impact your future children if you were, a great closer? I was like, man, if I was a great closer, like I'd be able to provide, opportunities for my family. I'd be able to, take them on great vacations. I would be able to have enough money to have time and spaciousness to just spend with my family. And he got me this point, and I was like, initially I thought I wanted to be a great closer, but after going through that exercise, I was like, damn, like I want to be a good closer. Like his questions had allowed me to enroll myself into what the impact of it would be. And then when it came to the next steps of, he's like, cool. So you really want to be it. Your why is strong enough. How do you do it? How do you be a good closer? And it was like, oh, well, I find a mentor within my company who I think is the best closer, and I speak with him once a week. I join a sales training program. I read a sales book. I practice, this many times a week. Like the execution part is actually the easy part. Like the craft of it. It was the why had to be strong enough. Like the flame had to be big enough that allowed, like, this is just what I do. I mean, my vision is like, that's my vision. So I'm going to do this. And that just has always been part of that. So I think, for me, it's just always having a really powerful vision of what the impact of being a great closer would be, and also being a authentic closer, one that actually isn't like closing and like I win, you lose, but like, hey, I'm closing you because I'm selling you a product that I know that will give you value, that will allow you to rise up. We're going to win together through doing this. And, when I was at, Microsoft, and I was getting to the point of looking for the next thing, I kept on thinking of like, what is it that I want to do? What's my next role? And I was like, was it sales? Is it leadership? Is it marketing? I was like, I got really stuck on the what. And so I I actually chose to change the question that I was asking myself. Was like, well, how do I want to feel at my next role? Like, what are the most important things at my next role that will impact me? And, I came down to three main things. Number one is I really wanted to be challenged as a sales professional. I wanted to move my identity from being a sales rep to a sales professional. And that came with the craft. Number two, I wanted to be part of a great culture. Like, nothing that was wrong with the outreach or with the Microsoft culture, but sometimes I felt like there was just a bunch of individual contributors who happened to be reporting to the same manager. Like, I wanted a crew. Like, I wanted like fist bumps in the office. Like, hey, let's like get after this today. And, number three is I wanted leadership, whether it was right away or at least the opportunity to move into leadership. And I wanted to be modeled to me, what is a great leader do and how do they show up? And that became the lens through which I was looking throughout my next opportunities. And I was interviewing at Amazon, LinkedIn, everywhere. And it wasn't until I went into the outreach office that it just clicked. My stomach was like, oh, this is it, dude. This nails every single one of the things I was looking for, because it was really clear that those were important things that would get me to at least the beginning stages of what my vision is and was.
I love that story about working with what's it? His name's Ben.
Ben Skemper.
Right? Ben Skemper, about being a closer. If I were to put you on the spot, what's that thing for you now that you're aspiring towards?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you and I talk about, a good amount, is what does it mean to be the CEO? Like, what does it mean to have the identity being the CEO of not necessarily a job and a company, but more the CEO of my mission, of my purpose, of like what I'm really trying to bring to this world. And, I've never wanted to have a job. The concept of a job to me is like, that's man-made. Like, that's, there's an opportunity here. And some people are truly embodying and living this. They wake up every single day and they are living their mission. It is no longer about, working for something. And that's always been, what I believe is possible for me. And, I'm not meant to say I'm doing that right now, just in an earlier stage of that vision, but like, there's an opportunity for me to truly, one day, fully step into full-time, CEO role of Alluviance, the company that I founded, we're, in partnership together, you and I are throwing the Arise immersion, and it's part of that vision. And, what the CEO role also is not only am I throwing incredible transformational events for people who are also wanting to find meaning and purpose and also work on their craft, something, I want to do, I'm doing myself. But it's also to allow people to be in community, like to just like feel like they got a crew. They're not doing this alone. They're surrounded by high quality people who are investing in themselves, who believe in bringing something true to this world. And, I'd say the biggest thing that's come online for me, I think, especially over the past couple of years, that I didn't used to think was as important, is I want spaciousness. I want to be able to wake up and have a nice long morning routine. You and I have talked about this, like meditation and breath work and journaling and reading. I want to be able to go surfing in the morning and like take my future kids to school and spend time, whenever I want to. I want to be on my, what's most important to me, when it's time for me to have a family, is like to really just like, that's going to be my number one priority. And that doesn't mean I want to stop making money through bringing my mission to the world, but the lifestyle, I do truly think that one can have it all, man. You can have it all. You can have the meaning, you can have the great relationship, you can have the wonderful family, you can, make enough money to support yourself and give back. Like, yeah, I mean, my vision's been like really been like coming online lately, or I'm like, man, what could it really be and feel like if anything was possible?
And it is. And, that's one of the reasons that, at this point we're talking, at least texting, just about every single day. And I love talking to you because you're such a big picture type of guy. And I feel like you help me to see bigger. And I get jazzed up when I hear you talk about this stuff, and it inspires me to do the same. And, you mentioned this right before we started recording, talking about, kind of three levels, so to speak, of thinking. And at the bottom level, or the lowest level, is tactical output. I need to send these follow-up emails. I need to have a one-on-one with my AE, things like that, where many of us get stuck, and we focus on those things all day long. And then there's like the second level, and maybe there's more to it than this, but the way I interpret it was there's a second level of like, what's your vision? Like, where are you going? It's like, well, I'm doing the one-on-one with the AE because I want to become a great leader. And, I want to set up my company for success or grow my skill set or whatever you're doing. I'm making cold calls because I want to get promoted so I can make more money and get out of my student debt. Okay, cool. And then there's like the third thing, that the highest part, which is like, okay, in order to get to where I really want to get to, who do I need to become? Kind of reminds me of that closer situation you were talking about with Ben, of, yes, becoming a closer in that instance maybe turned you into someone that was more confident, that maybe was making more money, that maybe was winning more deals, that maybe was influential with their friends and relationships. But I would actually argue, flip it on its head and say, once you can do those things, once you are more confident, once you can influence people, once you can do these things, then you're a freaking closer. Once you can, have deep and meaningful conversations and help people to achieve their goals, then you're a freaking leader, So maybe just expound on that. I don't know if I described it, how you were thinking it in your head, but I'd love to just hear what you believe, based on kind of what I said there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good things there. So, I was just having one of my good friends and also mentors is a guy named Zachary Wagner, and he shared this frame with me that I thought was really profound. And he described it as like kind of three different levels of vision. And number one is your spiritual vision. And that doesn't necessarily even need to mean, God or anything. I mean, for me, part of it is definitely God and my faith. It's just a very, core part of my identity, and something that's always been a core part of my identity. So I'm so grateful for, but also just like your spiritual vision of like, what's the meaning you're doing here? Kind of what I was speaking to earlier, like who and what is like what you're meant to be doing, and what's that vision? When are you in your greatest gifts, and how do you do more of that and make it better for other people? And that's, it starts with that, and just the energy that comes from that is, creates the domino effect. The second layer then is the strategic vision. That comes from, cool, if like we're gonna do this, like how does that actually come down a little bit into real life, just a tiny bit, from my business, my my partnerships, what I'm doing every single day. Like if I'm trying to bring forth a new wave of rising leadership to help people feel a greater sense of purpose, connection, and growth, which is my mission statement, what does that look like from a strategic? Well, I throw immersions. I have a podcast that you were on. I'm on podcasts like this. I have a sales team that I lead. What are the conversations that we're having there? And that becomes a little bit more strategic. And that also provides me, the financial opportunity to be able to live that. And then from there, the layer below is what you said earlier, the tactical vision of, cool, what does that mean in terms of how I need to operationalize all of this? The one-on-ones that we're doing, the the logistics side of it, I'm talking with a virtual assistant right now of, well, can I start to streamline, operationalize, because my time is worth a certain amount of money based on, hey, if I want to make X percentage of money this year, each hour of my time, I did this calculation, is worth about $250 an hour. So if I'm hosting on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok to develop my brand and to build Alluviance, is that worth $250 an hour? Or can I automate that with a virtual assistant, $10 an hour, for $20 an hour? And that just determines where am I making the most use of time. And by no means am I perfect at that. If you look at my calendar, you're going to see I'm playing Tetris most days with my calendar blocks. But that's, again, that's part of my vision of stepping more into that spaciousness right there.
Here's something that I was actually talking about with a friend this morning, and this is why I wanted to dig into it, is I feel like there are moments, I feel like we could all relate to this. There are moments in time in your career, in your life, where everything's flowing, right? You're killing it, you're hitting quota, your team's crushing, you got a new job, whatever, and it just seems easy, And in those moments, I'll speak for myself, is when I tend to do more of I find the time in the space to meditate. I find the time to journal. I find time to travel, to spend time with friends, to do things creatively that, get me well-rounded. And I'm just like on the blackjack table, and I'm just like, hit me. And I'm just getting ace after ace, and that happens. And then there's other times where it's the opposite, maybe not even the opposite, but it's just not that. It's like, it's a little bit of a slog, and some good stuff happens, but you feel like you're grinding. And in those moments, you focus, or I won't say you, I'll say me, I focus more on the tactical side. So for example, right now, I feel like, I'm 4.5 months into leaving a very well-paying job and running my own business, and don't know my ass from my elbow most days. And so I feel like I'm in a bit of a slog right now. And so I am focused more on the tactics. I am focused more on the emails and the follow-up calls. And there's a moment for that. But I also notice, I'm not very good alignment with some of my own, deeper vision on most days. So
yeah,
I find it's hard to do that when you're playing behind, or when you're tight, or when you're maybe behind on the scoreboard where you want to be. How do you manage that? How would you coach me if I was on your team to manage that?
I mean, the best way that I coach, first off, is to speak through my own personal experience. And if I was even to tell you that I don't also participate in the same struggle that you speak of, I wouldn't deserve to be on this podcast right here. So it is a level of inquiry that I also have continuously. I'll tell you what does work for me is, first off, what are the foundational items that I know keep me of a certain balance, of a certain homeostasis. And for me, two things are both my morning practice and then working out. And then the third I would probably say is my community right there.
Yep.
And, my morning practice consists of, waking up every single morning, stretching right when I wake up, drinking a large glass of water, some athletic greens, hopping in a shower, finishing it as a cold shower with a round of Wim Hof, going and, meditating. And then I recently started watching a inspirational YouTube montage for like 10 minutes of just like, execute today, and just gets me kind of pointing, like, let's go here. So, I mean, if I'm taking care of that, and number two, if I'm sweating, like I run a lot. And also I found that when I've started lifting weights again, like that actually adds a lot to my mental health, especially. And then, number two, I'm part of, two different communities. I've paid to be part of these communities because it's a place I want to receive coaching. But also I love attending immersions and events and being in crew and community. I'm a part of a men's group. I'm also part of another group that talks about, focus on leadership development and personal development. And when I have people who I can be open and share with, and who are also continuously challenging me, and I'm getting continuously asked questions around how am I doing? What am I working on? What am I working towards? There's a level of accountability that comes with that. Like if it was just me, living on, doing my thing and working in, let's say building Alluviance, there's no, I need to be shaped. I gain energy from being around other people. And I love, I invest a lot of my money into coaching and receiving coaching from different people because I want them to ask me questions. I have a coach for different things. I have a therapist. I have a meditation and mindfulness and mental health coach. I have a business coach. It's just like having a consistent amount of people who are supporting me in that way, allow me to remain in that. But if you don't have that, the money to invest in that, like there's still communities, that you can be a part of that are free. You can still, speak with your personal friends and hold an accountability pod call every other week to talk about, what are some of the things that we're working on. And just make an intention, like the amount of people that I've either asked to mentor me within work or asked if I could mentee or mentor them, so that I could, be held a level of accountability. That's important. So if I'm doing that sort of stuff there, that's good. But I'll tell you, like during the day, when you get in the tactical side of it, the stress of the quota, I need to do this. I need to get this thing done. That weighs on you. And like, even like, as I say that, like, I feel my shoulders start to hunch almost even as I'm like, I'm getting weighed down by the pressure. And so whatever I can do to continuously, shock myself, so to speak, to like lift my head up again and say, where am I going here? What am I really trying to do? That's really important to keeping the vision and keeping my heart open towards what that vision is.
Have you ever felt, because, well, let me say this. I've never worked on your team, but I know people who have, and I know enough people who have said that you lead most calls with breathwork sessions or, intention settings or various things like that are not common, we'll say, in the SaaS sales world. And when you're hitting your number, like that's like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about. And when it's wartime, I imagine, because right now it's tough sledding for most sales teams. I don't know where you're at for your number. I don't have access to your sales force, but when it's tougher going, those things are usually the first things to kind of fall off the radar. So I'm just curious, have you, do you invest the same amount of time in those things? Do you invest less, more, when things are just objectively more challenging than when things are when we're just like crushing it?
I mean, it's interesting. FY 2022, so all of 2021 and the month of January, at Outreach, when I was a sales leader, we were that number one out of 42 teams, whatever it was. It was incredible. And we had just opened up the New York office, hired a whole bunch of people, and the fact that we were able to get to that, we were doing breath work. We were, having pipeline generation goals, and
you had swagger.
Yeah. I mean, there was like a vision. And we were tapped in, people were engaged and wanting to lean into the stuff we were doing, the breath work, the vision work, the talking about our whys, and crushed it. And then February 2022 hit. And for many, that was the very beginning of the economic conditions that we are in now. And for many sales orgs and sales teams and tech companies, especially, it went down. And that happened to our team. And that was really tough. like that hit me. I thought I was unstoppable, bro. Like I thought it was like, oh, I figured it out. I was like, you do this stuff with your team and you get people going, people sell well. And also it was helpful. We were selling a badass product and all that. And then when results start to go down, I'm like, what's wrong here? Do we need to be more tapped into our vision? Only doing some of that stuff and it still wasn't producing revenue. Do we need to be doing more, talking about sales tactics stuff? Okay, well, we did that, but like it still wasn't doing stuff. It's like, all of a sudden, like we weren't necessarily seeing the results manifesting like we thought they were supposed to if we invest into the time and the energy of that. And that was a really tough time mentally for me. It broke, it brought me down a lot. And I look back on that time now and, oh my God, am I thankful for that time, because it taught me struggle and how to still have, still work through the struggle. Cause it's not always going to be high fiving all the time. And like, this is great. You're great. I'm great. We're all great. There's certain times that it's just like, you're at that bottom right there. And that brought me down. I mean, I struggled with mental health at certain times. Like I had to really, take a step back and find more spaciousness for myself and do some deeper work on me, because there was parts that like I needed to slow down. And I got, professional help, and, really the, hey, I need to like make my mental health my number one priority here, because if I'm showing up mentally not there as the leader, that's creating a transmission that's not going to be a good transmission that people want to be feeling. Yeah. But going through that now, people are still struggling with mental health stuff today. People are still struggling with like, why am I working so hard? But it's not. And I'm not saying I'm perfect and I've made it on the other side of it. I still work on it every single day, but I'm able to meet people there so much better and have so much more empathy for them, and, coach or just guide or just share my experiences. Hey, bro, or, hey, sister, like, I see you. Like, yeah, shit's hard, but like, you're going to make it through. And like, here's like ways, just like, make sure you're like self-care above everything. Oh, like sales is one of those things. If you're mentally hurting, good luck on any sales, strategy you want to try. But if there's not that underlying like mental, emotional, and spiritual health, like it's not going to be good right there. And so certain times when you go through struggle, it's just a mirror that says, yo, just like slow down.
Yeah. What does self-care in the sales realm mean to you?
I would say self-care in the sales realm is, number one, a lot of sleep. Get as much sleep as possible. Yeah. I would say make sure you're eating healthy and working out. I'd also say it's just like, make sure you're blocking your calendar for times when you are, doing the activities of building pipeline, doing the activities of prepping for your calls, doing the activities of, collaborating with your team. It's like, have the foundational items that says, as long as I show up and I execute on what my plan is here, even if it doesn't work out, like I try, like I did everything I controlled everything that I was, able to control.
I like the notion of self-care sometimes being just like taking care of your future self. So it's like, oh, there's this thing that I don't really want to do. It would definitely make my Monday easier, but fuck it. I'll handle it on Monday morning. And sometimes it's like, dude, if I just did that, took 10 minutes to handle that on Friday afternoon while I was like jamming, listening to a podcast or something, and I did 3 of those things, my life would be so much easier when I kick off the week. And I know Monday morning I might be a little slower on the roll or something like that, So I do like that mindset. I want to ask you one more question before we get into a couple rapid fires, and that's about the Arise Immersion, July 14th through 16th in Austin, Texas, that we're running together, as well as with our friend Clara Johnson. We did a whole nother podcast about, we talked a lot about the retreat, so folks can go check that one out. It's in the queue a couple episodes before this one. But I'm just curious, like, hard to say, Alex, what's the one reason that you're most excited about that immersion? Like what is like getting you stoked? We're 2 months out from it. How are you feeling?
That is a phenomenal question right there. What is getting me most excited about that? I think for me, it's, there's 3 pillars of the Arise immersion. Number one, we're helping tech sales professionals perfect the art and the craft of sales, right? We've talked about that: discovery, demoing, negotiating, prospecting. Number 2, we're helping, transform the inner game. We're helping people understand their why, what their vision is. We're taking people to their edge by doing breath work and cold plunge and, meditation. We're having a Zen monk, one of my coaches, Rob Renahan, come and, take people through a powerful meditation. And number 3, we're developing community. Like that's awesome. Like the tech sales professional getting together and just do cool stuff in the wonderful city of Austin. My favorite part about that is those are the three things that I love the most in this world. And they're all combined in a one single thing in a 3-day immersive event where people from across the, the country, from different tech companies who are wanting to better themselves, who are wanting to, find more, who want to just like meet other people who are wanting to invest themselves this way. It's like, we're just getting together and we're just like, what are you guys thinking here? What do you guys like? Just and asking powerful questions and doing cool experiences and breaking bread together and going to our edge together. It's like, oh, this is different. So that then we can take that the essence of that and we can bring that back home to us in our jobs, our families, our friends, and just like that right there, man, like that tastes and feels good. And that feels like there's meaning in that, not just for me, not just for you, but like for everybody who's like, oh, let's go in here, let's source and nourish each other, and let's bring that out to the world. That sounds badass.
That's beautifully said. Subtle plug, alluviance.co/arise. If what Alex just said is speaking to you in your soul, check that out, or either of our LinkedIn profiles. Alex, rapid fire question time. Sip your water, take a breath, whatever you need, because we're coming in to close this thing out. All right. So first question is, we're big readers on this podcast. I don't know how much of a reader you are or are not, but I'd love to hear any books that have made huge shifts in your life. They do not need to be a sales book. I would imagine, probably are not sales books, but anything that stand out to you, you've recommended to other people, you come back to and reread, anything like that stand out?
Yeah, I've got a few for you. One of my favorites is The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It was just a really powerful book that I've read a couple of times, especially when I'm struggling and I need to like find out, how to help my inner self right there. Another great book is The Celestine Prophecy, which is such an interesting one, just about feeling the frequency and the energy of the world and following where you feel called to most. And it's told in a really wonderful narrative anecdote of going to Peru and finding these ancient manuscripts. So it's just like really, really cool. And, there's a fantasy series that I really love called the Stormlight Archives. And it was one of my first fantasy series books about just like medieval times with like, magical stuff built into it. I learned and felt more about leadership and fighting for something, and bringing that back to what I was doing in my real life than any book there was. And just the characters, I relate so much to different characters. So those are three of my top ones. But I could check out my Kindle and there's a whole bunch more.
I love it. What goes on in the Alex Kremer headphones music wise?
Oh, my dad was a very big Grateful Dead guy. And so I grew up listening to Grateful Dead. And we're actually going and seeing the Dead and Company with John Mayer out in New York. My dad and one of my sisters is coming out. And, I've started to get a little more into country, which is great. I mean, I'm in Austin right now, and who knows if I end up living here soon. But that I did just buy my first pair of cowboy boots while I was down here.
No, you did.
I did, man.
Tell me, don't lie. Are they on right now?
No, but they need to be. Thank you for holding me accountable.
That's great. I actually saw Dead and Company last year in Chicago. I think it's their last year this year.
Yeah, it's one of the last shows. It's gonna be bittersweet. My dad's been seeing them since like the 60s. They're just a great jam band, and they take you on a journey with their music for like 15 minutes, and they come back to like the original, chorus. Like, wow, we're still on this song. Where have I been the past 15 minutes?
That's great. That's great. All right, I want to take you to the selfish section of the rapid fire. Who is one person that needs to come on this podcast?
Whoa, that is good. One person that needs to come onto this podcast is Claire Johnson. How could she not? I mean, Clara and I go way back at Outreach. I used to manage her when she was an AE, and then she moved into a sales management role and crushed it there at Outreach. And now actually came over and joined me here at Catalyst. And now is obviously, the third, contributor here for the Arise immersion. And she's wickedly not just intelligent, but she's got some spiritual, like, man, some shit vibe to her.
She's got some, like, I've never been to her home office, but I just imagine there's like crystals everywhere on the walls and plants and just everything, all the energies going on.
She's got that for sure.
Yeah. Are there any quotes, mantras, life philosophies, anything like that you've been taught, that you stick to, or even just that you've been thinking about recently?
Yes. I love this question. I'm going to give you 3. Okay.
Yes.
The first one, you move towards what you think and talk about most. You move towards what you think and talk about most. Number 2, the purpose of a vision is not necessarily that you achieve it. The purpose of a vision is who it causes you to be today. And I love that one. I mean, it's really about, like, this is why we feel lit up, is so that we can embody those characteristics today. And number 3, and this is more just my life philosophy, it's the beginning of the beginning, man. It's just the beginning of the beginning. Like, hey, we might say we know maybe 1 or 2 things here, but like, it is just the start of the start. And that just makes me feel a greater sense of humility. And also I'm like, man, I cannot wait for this exciting journey that we're about to embark upon.
I love it, man. I love it. I know we're running tight on time. I appreciate you coming on. I'd first just like to point everyone to go check you out on LinkedIn, Alex Kremer, to check out the Rising Leader podcast, to check out the Arise Retreat /immersion, to check you out on Instagram, Alex Kremer. What else? What any final words? Any other places they should check you out? Oh, the weekly newsletter from your weekly dose of Alluviance. What else?
Yeah, we got a little YouTube channel as well, Alex Kremer 8. And I think the most important thing is just, like, find meaning. That's my main thing here. Just like, whether it's through Arise or through something else or through yourself, just like, find meaning. We're meant to have meaning here in this world. We're not just meant to have jobs and just like work all the time. It's like, find what the frick you're supposed to be doing. And if that happens, I'm happy about that.
I love it, man. We never have enough time, but I appreciate you coming on.
Oh yeah, man. Appreciate it.
Peace.